She was the kind of girl people forgot in a crowded room. Quiet, observant, always holding her thoughts a little too tightly. But inside her chest lived a world louder than anything around her. She wrote stories in the margins of notebooks, on receipts, on the back of bus tickets. Words were the only place she felt whole. The day she finished her first real manuscript, her hands trembled. It felt like holding a fragile part of herself. One wrong breath and it could break. She printed it, placed it carefully into a large envelope, and sent it to a publisher she admired. She didn't tell anyone. Some dreams are too soft to expose to the world. Weeks passed. She pretended not to wait, but every time the mail slot clicked, her heart jumped. Then, one gray morning, the envelope came back. Thin, light, the kind that never carries good news. Inside was her first rejection. Her throat tightened. She read it over and over, searching for something, a mistake, a hint of kindness, anything. It was just a cold no. She folded the letter with shaking hands, placed it inside an old shoebox under her bed, and whispered to herself, "Fine, then I'll earn my yes." She didn't know it yet, but that shoebox would change her life. The second rejection didn't hurt as sharply as the first. It was more like pressing on a bruise you already knew was there. She kept writing. Late nights, early mornings, between shifts at her dull office job where her creativity went to die under spreadsheets and polite small talk. Her colleagues talked about promotions, mortgages, weekend sales. She talked to no one about the worlds she was building after midnight. Every time she finished a story, she sent it out. Different magazines, different publishers, different submission portals with cold, automated confirmations. "Thank you for your submission. If you don't hear from us in 6 to 8 weeks, assume we've passed." She began to understand that silence could scream louder than a no. The rejections started arriving like seasons. Some were a single sentence. Some looked almost apologetic. A few felt like they'd been copied and pasted 1,000 times before. She read each one, folded it carefully, and placed it into the shoebox. Her parents didn't know about the box. They only knew about the tired look in her eyes and the fact that writing didn't pay the bills. "Maybe keep it as a hobby," her father said gently one evening, not unkind, just afraid for her. "There's nothing wrong with being practical," her mother added, stirring sugar into her tea like she was stirring reality into her daughter's dreams. Her friends were worse in a softer way. "Publishers are strict, it's not your fault. Everyone wants to be a writer. You're smart, just get a stable job, you'll feel better." But she didn't want better. She wanted hers. So she smiled, nodded, and went back to her tiny room where the shoebox lived like a secret heartbeat under her bed. Rejection letter number 14 arrived on a rainy Tuesday. She read it, felt the familiar sting. Then something shifted. For the first time, she didn't feel like the letter was proof she was a failure. It felt like a stamp, a mark, evidence that she was still in the fight. She slid the new letter into the box and watched the stack grow. "Fine," she whispered, closing the lid. "If the world won't recognize me yet, the box will." Rejection letter number 27 didn't come in an envelope. It came as an email. Quick, casual, almost lazy. "Thank you for your submission. Unfortunately, it's not the right fit for us." She read it in the break room at work, surrounded by humming vending machines and the smell of burnt coffee. No signature, no name, just a polite dismissal from a faceless wall. Something inside her cracked. She locked herself in the restroom and stared at her reflection. Her eyes looked older than they had any right to, not wiser, just tired. Tired of hoping. tired of pretending each no made her stronger. On the bus home, she didn't look out the window or drift into stories like she usually did. She watched her own hands, the same hands that kept typing, editing, rewriting. For what? That night, she didn't sit at her desk. She sat on the floor. The shoebox was heavier now. When she pulled it from under the bed, it thudded softly against the wood. She opened it, and the letters stared back at her, a crowd of polite rejections, all carrying the same message. You're not enough. She wanted to throw it away, to tear every letter, to burn them, to erase the proof that she had tried and failed this many times. Her fingers dug into the sides of the box. Instead, she picked up the very first letter she'd received. She read it. Then the second. Then the third. Some were harsh, some were indifferent, but as she moved through them, something unexpected appeared. A pattern. The earliest ones were cold, standard templates. The later ones weren't. I enjoyed parts of this, but struggled with the pacing. Your characters feel vivid, but the plot needs clarity. There is a unique voice here. It's not quite there yet, but don't stop. Her heart skipped. They weren't all saying, you're hopeless. Some of them were saying, in their stiff, professional way, you're getting closer. Her eyes filled, not with the sharp sting of humiliation, but with a slower, heavier emotion. Grief for the version of herself who believed every no meant she should disappear. She sat there for a long time, surrounded by letters like paper ghosts, and whispered, So, I'm not standing still. I'm moving. I just didn't see it. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, took a deep breath, and closed the shoebox gently. If this many people took the time to reject her personally, then she must be a lot closer to a yes than she thought. The next morning, nothing outside had changed. The city was still noisy, the office was still dull. Life still moved with the same indifferent rhythm. But something inside her had shifted. On her lunch break, she opened a blank document and renamed it, Draft 2, the version that deserves a yes. She didn't start a new story. She opened the one she'd already written and loved, and decided to tear it apart. That week, she disappeared a little. She stopped staying late at work to help with tasks that weren't hers. Sorry, I have plans, she said, even when those plans were just her, a desk lamp, and a blinking cursor. She quit scrolling social media at night and stopped comparing her unfinished life to everyone else's filtered achievements. Her world shrank to 3 things: her job, her manuscript, and the shoebox under her bed. She read books on craft, on structure, on how to make characters feel like they were breathing. She highlighted passages that made her chest ache and asked herself, why does this hit so hard? Then she went back to her own pages and refused to settle for good enough. There were nights she rewrote the same paragraph 10 times. There were mornings she left for work with red eyes and ink on her fingers. People noticed. Are you okay? You look tired, a colleague said. I'm fine, she answered, and for the first time, fine didn't mean numb. It meant in progress. Her parents worried when she stopped coming to family dinners as often. Don't forget real life while you're chasing this dream, her mother said softly. She wanted to explain that this was her real life, this messy, exhausting, obsessive attempt to create something that mattered. This was the most alive she'd ever felt. Month by month, the manuscript changed. Scenes she used to be proud of now felt hollow, so she cut them without mercy. New scenes appeared, rawer, truer, closer to the girl she'd been afraid to show on the page. By the end of the year, the story wasn't just better, it was hers, in a way it had never been before. On a quiet Sunday evening, she printed the new draft. The stack of pages sat on her desk like a beating heart. Her hands shook, not from fear this time, but from the weight of everything it carried. She took a deep breath, opened her laptop, and made a list of publishers. This time, she didn't choose the ones she thought might say yes. She chose the ones who had already said no. If you watched me fail, she thought, you're going to watch me rise. She uploaded the manuscript, wrote her cover letters with trembling honesty instead of stiff politeness, and hit send. Then she slid open the drawer, glanced at the shoebox, and whispered, "All right, let's see what kind of no you give me now." Waiting became its own kind of torture. Days blurred into weeks, and life moved on as if nothing extraordinary had been sent out into the world. She still took the same bus, sat at the same desk, typed the same reports that would be forgotten the moment they were read. But inside, everything was different. Every time her inbox chimed, her stomach tightened. Sometimes it was just newsletters she never remembered subscribing to. Sometimes it was sale notifications. Sometimes it was nothing at all, just her imagination reaching. The first reply came after 3 weeks. A rejection. "Thank you for submitting. Unfortunately, your work is not a fit for our current list." She read it calmly. The words slid over her like water over stone. The second rejection was similar. The third, the 7th, the 10th. They still stung, but they no longer wrote her story. They were just lines in the margins. Then came number 43. She didn't know it would matter when she opened it. It looked like all the others, a small, neat email from a familiar publisher's name, the same kind of message that had once ruined entire days. She clicked it almost mechanically. "Thank you for letting us read your manuscript. We're going to pass for now." Her chest tightened, but before she could close it, her eyes caught the next sentence. "However, I want you to know this. Your voice is strong. There is something real here. Please keep writing." She reread that line. Once, twice, 10 times. Your voice is strong. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't an offer. It wasn't even particularly poetic. But it was human. It was specific. Someone on the other side hadn't just skimmed her pages and clicked reject. They had read her, seen her, felt something. Her throat burned. For years, rejection had sounded like a verdict. You're not enough. Now, for the first time, it sounded like something else. You're not there yet, but you could be. She printed the email and held the paper in trembling hands. It was still a no. It still belonged in the box. But when she lifted the lid and placed it on top of the pile, it didn't feel like another brick on her chest. It felt like a crack in the wall. She closed the shoebox and rested her palm on the lid, her pulse unsteady but alive. "Okay," she whispered, wiping her eyes. "If a stranger believes I should keep going, then I will." By the time winter came, she had made a fragile kind of peace with no. She still wrote every day, she still sent out her work, but she stopped waiting like a prisoner counting days on a wall. Life had to be more than refreshing an inbox and bracing for disappointment. So she built small rituals. Morning coffee in her chipped blue mug. A walk before sunset, no headphones, just the sound of her own footsteps. A rule: no checking email after 9 p.m. Her heart had limits, and she was finally learning to respect them. One gray Wednesday, her alarm dragged her out of a shallow sleep. She checked her phone on autopilot, weather, time, messages. Then, without thinking, she opened her email. There it was. Subject line: Manuscript submission. Her chest tightened. That familiar mix of hope and dread crawled up her spine. She hovered her thumb over the notification and nearly swiped it away. She was tired of watching her own hopes rise and collapse before breakfast. Tired of starting the day with proof that someone, somewhere, didn't believe in her work. For a moment, she told herself, I'll read it later, after work, after I've survived the day. Her thumb flicked slightly, just enough to start the swipe that would archive the message. Something stopped her. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was defiance. Maybe it was that quiet, stubborn part of her that refused to let fear decide what she was allowed to see. She tapped the email. The first line looked like every other rejection. Thank you for your patience while we reviewed your manuscript. Her heart sank. Her eyes blurred, already bracing for the familiar cut. Then she read the second line. We'd like to discuss it further. Are you available for a call this week? The words didn't register at first. Her brain tried to twist them into something else, a mistake, a scam, a joke. She read it again, and again. The sentence stayed the same. We'd like to discuss it further. Her hands started to shake. She sat down on the edge of her bed, the room suddenly too small, too quiet. She pressed a palm to her mouth as if the sound of her own breathing might break the moment. She printed the email, just like she had with rejection number 43. The printer hummed, oblivious, spitting out the thin sheet that carried the first real maybe of her life. She walked to the shoebox, opened it slowly, and slipped the email on top of the stack. For the first time, there was a letter in the box that wasn't a no. See, she whispered to the trembling air, to the ghosts of all those old rejections. One of you finally changed sides. The call was awkward at first. Her voice shook. The editor's didn't. He sounded calm, practiced, like someone who had said these sentences 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. But there was something in his tone, a warmth, a curiosity, that felt new. We really connected with your main character, he said. There's a rawness to the story. It needs work, but we think it's worth investing in. Worth investing in? For years, her words had been worth deleting, worth discarding, worth a quick, unfortunately. Now, suddenly, they were worth something. They talked about edits, timelines, contracts. She wrote everything down in a shaking hand, terrified she might wake up and find it all imagined. When she hung up, she didn't scream. She didn't jump. She just sat in silence for a long time, staring at her own reflection in the dark laptop screen. You did it, she whispered to the girl looking back at her. You actually did it. The months that followed were hard in a new way. Revisions, deadlines, pages covered in comments, whole chapters reworked. Some nights she felt like she was disassembling herself with a scalpel, one sentence at a time. But this time, she wasn't alone. There was an editor on the other end who believed the book could become something real. When the first printed copy arrived, it came in a simple brown package. Her hands hovered over it for a moment, almost afraid to open it, as if seeing it would make it vanish. Then she tore the cardboard gently and pulled out the book. Her name, on the cover, in ink. She ran her fingers over the letters like she was learning to read for the first time. The launch wasn't glamorous. No red carpets, no lines around the block. A small bookstore, a modest crowd, a stack of freshly printed copies on a wooden table that squeaked when she leaned on it. Still, to her, it felt like the center of the universe. After the event, when the lights were dimmed and the last person left with a signed copy, she went home with a bag full of books and a heart that didn't know whether to laugh or cry. At her desk, under the familiar yellow lamp, she did something she'd imagined for years. She pulled the shoebox out. One by one, she took a copy of her book, slipped it into padded envelopes, and addressed them to the publishers who had rejected her. The same names, the same companies, different reality. Inside each package, she placed a short note. "Thank you for reading my work back then. Your no was part of this yes." No sarcasm, no venom, just truth. When she sealed the last envelope, she looked at the shoebox, now lighter somehow, and exhaled. They had been right to say no when they did. She could see that now. The girl who wrote those first drafts wasn't ready. But she was brave. Brave enough to try, to fail, and to keep sending her heart out in brown envelopes. She placed one signed copy of her book into the shoebox and closed the lid. For the first time, it didn't feel like a graveyard of dreams. It felt like an altar. Years later, people only saw the visible part of her story. They saw the book on shelves. They saw her name on reading lists. They saw the invitations, festivals, panels, interviews where hosts introduced her as an inspiring success story. No one saw the nights she'd cried over a glowing cursor. No one saw the first email that almost broke her. No one saw the shoebox. Until the day she decided to show it. She was invited to speak to a group of young writers in a small auditorium that smelled of paper and dust. They sat with notebooks open, eyes bright and scared in the same way hers once were. She walked onto the stage holding it. An old, ordinary shoebox. The cardboard edges softened with time, the lid slightly warped. It looked so small compared to the size of her life now. "This," she said, placing it gently on the table, "is my first publisher." The room laughed softly, confused. She opened the lid. Dozens of folded letters, yellowed and curled at the edges, lay inside like sleeping feathers. "These are all the times I was told no," she continued. "People think success is this." She gestured vaguely upwards. "One big moment. It isn't. It's this. It's staying when every piece of paper tells you to leave." She read them a few lines from the harsher rejections, then the gentler ones, then the one that said, "Your voice is strong. Please keep writing." She saw something shift in their faces, a quiet relief, like maybe their own no's didn't mean stop, just not yet. Then she pulled out one last envelope, smaller, newer, sealed. "This," she said softly, "is the most important letter in this box." She opened it with careful fingers and unfolded a single page. It wasn't from a publisher. It was from her. "Dear you," she read aloud, her own voice trembling. "I know you're tired. I know the silence hurts. I know you think maybe they're right about you. But I've seen where you end up. I've seen the people who cry reading a sentence you almost deleted. So please, don't stop. Not yet. Not tonight. Just write one more page." Her eyes burned. She swallowed, blinking up at the ceiling light that blurred into a soft halo. "When I wrote this," she said quietly, "I wasn't a published author. I wasn't invited anywhere. I was just a girl in a small room with a shoebox full of proof that the world didn't want what I had to offer." She closed the letter, pressing it to her chest for a second. "If you remember anything from today, let it be this. One day, you will become the person you needed when you wanted to give up. And when that happens, I hope you're kind to the version of you who kept going without any guarantees." When the talk ended, students lined up to speak to her. Some carried notebooks. Some carried their own printed pages. One girl, eyes red, whispered, "I have a box too." She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Good," she said. "That means you're already on your way."